This is Cold Start.
And for this episode, we're going to do a checkered pass, doing a deeper dive into my journey of going to Pikes Peak and participating in the hill climb in 2023.
I still can't get my head around the fact that you actually raced this thing. The more I learn about it, the more terrifying it is, and the more it just looks like something nobody in their right mind should really do. So I really want to learn about your experience there, how you decided to do this in the first place, what it took to prepare to get up there, and just more about the process.
Yeah, crazy enough, it was something that, I never even thought that I was going to be able to get to do this event. Like, I didn't even think that this was a dream that I was going to get to fulfill. Now, as a child, I watched Pikes Peak and was super into it, and I used to have a Hot Wheels of the Pennzoil Tacoma Pikes Peak Special.
Right?
And so this was an event that was always on my mind, and I always thought was so cool and so awesome. And even as I started racing, I just never thought that I would ever be given an opportunity to go and do it. And so where the story kind of starts is the car that we built, that we ended up taking to Pikes Peak. And when we originally built the road course sprint car with MFG Motorsports, we wanted to make a road course car. It was for road course racing.
Yeah, this wasn't a hill climb car that you were building, right? It just was something for an entirely different purpose.
Exactly. We had the focus of, we're going to take it to Sonoma Raceway, Laguna Seca. We're going to just race it wheel to wheel if we could, right? And we ended up doing some time attack events with it and some touring car events and stuff like that, which was a really cool story. But since we built this thing, it was so radical, it was so different that there wasn't really a class for it. Surprise, surprise, you build a one-off crazy thing. And then we're like, where can we take this that it would fit in?
Yeah, you're looking at the characteristics of the car. You're like, okay, so we have this kind of wheelbase, we have all this aero, we have all these aspects of the car that are based off a sprint car. So
Right.
You think about where a sprint car is going to go. Naturally, is probably the first thing you think of is the dirt.
Yeah, and when Pikes Peak was dirt back in the days, in the 50s and the 60s, the champ cars that the Andrettis and the Unsers and these famous drivers were racing up the mountain were essentially that era of a sprint car.
It's unreal.
And they just made them work. And it makes sense of why a sprint car would have been great for Pikes Peak with the dirt is they were used to sliding those things around. And that's what's great is like looking back at that footage of even, Bobby Unser and his champ car, sprint car of the era, watching him dance that thing up the mountain and sliding it was unbelievable. And so when we built this road course sprint car and thinking about places we could take it, we're like, oh my God, building a road course sprint car was such a terrible idea and such a crazy idea to begin with, but it was successful when we built it. We're like, well, let's come up with another crazy idea. Let's take it to Pikes Peak. Back in the day, they used to run sprint cars up the mountain when it was dirt. Now that we've made this pavement car, essentially, that can work left and right, let's take a sprint car back to Pikes Peak.
That's just out of control. And you have to imagine, aren't most sprint cars sort of angled to the side? They're mostly making left turns, right?
Yeah, typically a sprint car it's an asymmetrical chassis. Now, the one that we started with, technically it's a Silver Crown if we want to get to the nitty-gritty of it. And,
we do.
And during the mid-2000s, Weissach built this Silver Crown chassis, the first ever that was symmetrical. And so for us, being able to build a quote-unquote road course sprint car, this symmetrical chassis made the most amount of sense to start with because we weren't going to have to modify it, cut it up, make a custom chassis. We could take a stock Weissach chassis and just modify its setup and the components that went into it to make it work both directions.
That's cool. And so that was the kind of vehicle of choice going up into the time when this was still a dirt track.
Yeah, on Pikes Peak, for a lot of time, the sprint car or the champ car was the preferred vehicle. That was the fastest of its time. And then it slowly got into like buggies where they started moving the engine to the rear, get a little bit more grip on the dirt and stuff like that. And that was also the same time when you started seeing mid-engine and rear-engine cars at Indianapolis, right? There was those eras where you would have like the Indy Roadsters comparative to the champ cars. So you would have front-engine vehicles competing against rear-engine vehicles. The same sort of transition happened on Pikes Peak. And then for a long period of time, the open wheel cars, because back then those were racing in the open wheel class, the current open wheel cars followed that kind of buggy styling.
Yeah, if you think about the open wheel cars going way back in time, if you picture one of the, the little car that's in the Monopoly game.
Yeah.
Right, where the wheels are open wheel. People don't think of those as open wheel cars quite the same as, a Formula car or something that you see today. I mean, that was sort of the car of choice for well, for all kinds of racing, really.
Right. And that open wheel class is the longest standing race class at Pikes Peak. So there's a handful of different categories at Pikes Peak. You can race a lot of different stuff, but the open wheel category, that's kind of where a lot of the history is of where the racing started, even back into those, the 1920s, really famous in the 1950s and 60s. And then that class nowadays, it's a little bit smaller. And so for us to bring a modern rendition of a sprint car that could compete at Pikes Peak, we're like, oh, we have to be in the open wheel class and be true to that history and, pay tribute to those guys in the 50s and 60s that raced sprint cars on dirt up the mountain. And now that it's all paved, let's bring a paved sprint car.
That's just crazy. I mean, even going back to, this race started in what, the 20s or 1916, right?
1916 was the first event.
Yeah. So, cars were still a pretty new thing at the time. So imagine what cars looked like back then.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And so this crazy idea that we had of, hey, let's go to Pikes Peak. Once again, we're like, all right, we're going to submit our application. We might not get accepted our first year. Like, who are we and all this sort of stuff. And, there's a lot of prowess to Pikes Peak and the people that get to compete there. And for me growing up, it's like all these famous people that have gotten to do it. And I'm like, who am I to get accepted as a driver to go? And we were surprised when we got accepted and we're like, oh crap, like we don't have a lot of time. And so we had built the road course sprint car in the course of 6 months. And we did 2 events with it, 2 competition events with it on road courses before we got accepted to Pikes Peak. And we're like, all right, we have like 4 months to June. Like we got to figure this thing out. And even though we were in our early stages and the car worked, there were still a lot of things that we needed to figure out, mainly suspension and tires. Those were the 2 main things that we were struggling with. And the tires we were using at the time were Trans Am TA2 tires, which were built for a car that weighed twice as much as our sprint car did. And they were closed fendered, where our car was open fender, it was open wheel. And so those tires had a hard time building heat and building traction. And so within the short period of time we swapped our suspension out. Pikes Peak, as we're going to talk about here very shortly, is there's a lot of bumps and undulations and different environments going up the mountain comparative to road course racing. So we changed the suspension. We were able to locate some Hoosiers that were going to work that were radials, not bias ply tires. And we basically got to test the car once in this new configuration at Sonoma Raceway. And we were doing out and ins just to make sure everything worked and everything was good. We had no vibrations, no issues. And then we put the car in a trailer and we shipped it to Colorado. So this new build that I've only raced or been in competition with twice, basically, and then we did all of these changes and setup changes. I got to test it once at Sonoma, and then I was like, all right, we'll figure out the rest on the mountain.
What were the events that you had done leading up to this?
Our debut event that we did was a U.S. Touring Car Championship race, the USTCC, at IndyCar weekend at Laguna Seca. That was the first ever event we did with it.
This doesn't register as touring car to me.
No. Thankfully, we had connections with the runner of the sanctioning body. We got permission to run the car during their race, and we ran under like exhibition. So we were classified as a touring car, but we basically just agreed that we weren't going to mess with their point standings. And so that was the first time we had ever run the car more than 2 laps was at that event.
So it was just an exhibition, so you didn't even get like a place standing in the overall race, but you got to compete in it.
Right. And so for their racing, they did standing starts, which for our vehicle, it's not really designed to do standing starts by any means. And so I actually opted to start at pit out at Laguna Seca. So they would start the race, and then I was at pit out, and then they would give me a green, and I could go chase after the field. So obviously I didn't even start last. I started with a disadvantage, and I was actually able to race up through the field to second. And then before we decided that we were going to pull into the pits and allow the rest of the racing to start. So we were quite competitive, even though we weren't allowed to finish.
But that's crazy. I mean, of all the pit lanes to start from, to have to go out from pit out at Laguna, where you're going down this really narrow road that has this huge hairpin in it of itself, right? Just like the pit out is so crazy at Laguna. It's just so strange, and like you're off in the dirt effectively. And this is where you started the race from.
Yeah. And so the car proved itself to be really competitive and worked really well. And that was what kind of like, sparked us to be like, what else can we do with it? And that's how Pikes Peak kind of all came together. And once again, like another harebrained idea of going to Pikes Peak. None of us on the team, Tim Barber was the one that built the car with my brother, and none of us had done Pikes Peak. None of us knew anything about Pikes Peak other than like it was cool and we wanted to go and do it. And so when we got accepted, we're like, okay, we have a lot to learn.
Hey, I've heard of this mountain. Let's go climb it. They have some kind of race. I think I'm vaguely aware of it, but we don't need to know that much about it. I mean, it's somewhere between bravery and insanity, like to go about it that way, right? To just dive headfirst into this huge race with all of this history that's held in such high regard and just like go for it.
Yeah, kind of it's to your own benefit to not know everything, because I think if you knew of all the risk and of all the insanity, maybe you wouldn't be like as inclined to go and do it. But I mean, we were stoked about it. We were all for getting accepted and like this whole tribute to like the old school sprint cars that used to run. And we really took that on and like felt like a lot of pride of, okay, we're going to go, but we just need to make it to the top.
When you applied for the race, did you have any connections or did you know anybody who knew anybody involved with the race or anywhere in the organizers? Or are you just like a cold call? Like, we're just going to mail in our application and see what happens?
So before we submitted our application, we went to a couple conventions. So we went to SEMA and we went to PRI to make those connections. And so we wanted to meet the people that were in charge of accepting you at Pikes Peak. And we did have a connection that kind of helped us get connected. We had a connection at Hoosier. And so that's also how we were able to source tires for the vehicle. And those tires that we were able to source for the vehicle were actually from Australia. They were for an Australian Formula Car series. And we got to set aside a handful of sets for us that got to stay here in the US to use for the car. That's another long story for another time. But we were able to make these connections and meet some of the people from Pikes Peak that run the organization. And so we were able to kind of like shake hands, put face to the name before we sent in our application. And then we also ran into the Vaschholz family, which will come into play later on in this story. But we were able to meet the Vaschholzes, who very famous name at Pikes Peak, lineage of grandfather, father, and son that have all raced and been awarded drivers of Pikes Peak. We met them at one of these conventions and started talking to them. We showed them pictures of the road course sprint car, and they're like, that thing's sick. That thing needs to be at Pikes Peak. It's like, whatever you guys need, you let us know. You need a shop, you need an area to work on that. We got a spot for you at our compound, essentially. And so these couple conventions that we went to, we made all the necessary connections with the people of Pikes Peak, as well as some of the competitors, to be like, hey, if you can put in a good word for us of like, we want to go and we got this cool thing that we want to share and bring up Pikes Peak, by all means, please help us out. And so I think a lot of that played into the part of us getting accepted for Pikes Peak. And the Pikes Peak community, and I'll say this multiple times throughout this story, it's insane. Like the people that do it, the love for the mountain, the love for the event, it's uncompared to any other form of motorsport I've ever been a part of or I've ever witnessed. And so it was really cool right off the bat. We kind of got in with the cool kids.
That's really cool. I mean, that's really resourceful, first of all, to be able to go to one of these shows. I mean, if you've ever been to one of these conventions, there's a lot of blinking lights and shiny things and distractions all over the place. And a lot of people go there for what doesn't look like I'd say real business reasons, like to actually accomplish something. They're just showing off something cool they built or what have you. But to actually go there, make connections with effectively some of the family of the royalty of this race that have been going there for years and years and years and racing and being successful and being welcomed in like that. That's such a cool story to know that they would embrace something so new and so unusual just right off the bat. That says a lot about sort of that spirit of the race itself.
Yeah, and we were going to be joining the race category, the open wheel category, in which the Vaschholz family has been participating in for a long time. And so we were going to be a direct competitor to them. I don't think they were too worried about the rookies coming to the mountain of dethroning them. And they put down some serious times and they put together a really serious program. So, and once again, for us going there, it was just making it to the top. That was our main focus. So our mindset going to the mountain. So we got the car in the trailer. We're going to Colorado. This new adventure that we're going to be taking on, it was instilled, and Tim and I kept talking about this, and Tim basically telling me multiple times of just make it to the top. We're not here to set any records. We're not here to win any races. We're not here to blow the doors wide open on this event. We're here to bring something unique, something different, show good, and make it to the summit come race day. And so when we went, that was really our mindset. We weren't going in of, we need to win, we need to go to a target time or anything of that nature. The focus was solely, let's make sure that the car runs correctly. I don't put a wheel wrong. We never go off course. We never have an accident. And come race day, we get to see a checkered flag at the summit, and I get some donuts.
It sounds like this should have been the thing they called drive to survive. When you compare the risks of the day-to-day, what's going on here, climbing up the mountain, guardrails, things that could go wrong all along the way, elevation, weather, compare that to what Formula One is, it seems almost tame by comparison.
Yeah, and so let me paint you a picture of like the first weekend that we unload and we put a car on the course, because you're talking about survival, right? Now, early in June, they do test weekends. And so you get to test the mountain, test the car, do all these sorts of things. And so our first day ever on the mountain, we're starting at the bottom, starting at the start-finish line. We're only racing the bottom section, which would be the qualifying section for race week. And the weather conditions were not ideal. They weren't terrible. It was foggy and misty and damp conditions. And our car, 500 wheel horsepower, solid rear end, solid front end, no ABS, no traction control, not really designed to work great in inclement weather. And I've never driven this car in damp conditions. And so this was a rather new thing. And so that first day, we kind of waited a little bit of like, maybe it'll dry up a little bit. Let's take some time. Let's not be too eager to get on the mountain. And while we're sitting there in base camp, in kind of where the pit area is, I watch some people leave from the starting line. And I think it was the second or third car to leave. And at Pikes Peak, you start from an area behind the start-finish line. So it's technically a flying start. You don't start from a stop. So you're able to get some speed up. And it's this kind of easy left-hand corner. And then that's where the start line is. And then it goes into a sweeping right. And so when you watch from where the cars are starting from a stop, you can't even see the start line. It kind of wraps around a little blind corner. There's trees. Third car that's taking off. He takes off, and it's like this little buggy thing. I think it's like a Sierra or something of that nature. It's like a tiny little buggy, single-seater, center seat. Dude takes off, tank slaps the thing, and launches it off to the right into the trees and just rips off the wheels of this thing. Didn't even make it to the starting line. This is day one. This is the third car. And this is my rookie year, and I haven't even set foot in my car yet, and I just watched a dude just total his car. And I'm like, what is this place?
Not even at the start line.
Not even at the start line. Didn't even make it to the starting line. And so, which maybe that was good that I saw that, because it really like reset the mindset of like, it's the first day of practice. You have a month to get through to even get to race day to not make a mistake. And so I took those first couple runs really nice and easy. And to my surprise, like those runs, I had done a lot of practice on the simulator. And so for those first runs, I was really just trying to compare of like, okay, did all this time in the simulator, how does it translate to the real world? Because like, obviously the real world's the real world and simulations are simulations. But to my surprise, I was like, oh, I'm recognizing these corners. Like, I kind of know where I'm going. Like, I'm feeling pretty confident, because the Vascholtzes gave me the advice of like, okay, you're a rookie. For your first couple runs, just hug that yellow line, that double yellow line right in the center. Just stay in the center. Just hug that yellow line and get a feel for things. First couple runs, like I'm going from white line to white line. I'm like, oh, I know where I'm at. Like, I know what's going on, and not driving fast, but just feeling confident that I'm able to predict the next corner. Now, my third practice run on the first day, halfway up, it gets socked in. Fog comes in. I couldn't see maybe 50 feet in front of me. And I'm like in the middle section. And I'm like, I know that there's a hairpin corner coming up, and I have no idea where it's at. And I got scared, and I like backed way off, and I did exactly what the Vascholtzes said of just hug that double yellow and just wait for something to happen. And that spooked me. Like that, like kind of brought that confidence back down of, okay, the mountain's serious. There's a lot of things that can happen out here. Don't get ahead of yourself. Don't feel confident. As soon as you feel confident, that mountain's going to tell you, you ain't ready yet. And thankfully, to my surprise, once we came off that run, I talked with Cody Vascholtz, the youngest of the Vascholtzes that race on the mountain. And he said, he's like, that's the worst I've ever seen the fog. Honestly, if that fog existed on race day, we wouldn't run. We would wait. So just keep in mind, that's the worst visibility the mountain's going to get. And I was like, okay, cool. All right. Like, it's not going to get as bad as that.
And this is your introduction, right? Practice 3, day 3. Is that what this is?
This is day 1, run number 3.
Oh,
On the
damn.
bottom of the mountain. So like the first couple runs, I was getting a good feel for it and getting a little more confident, carrying a little more speed. And then that third run, it was like total just white out. Like, I don't know where I'm at. And I don't know where this corner's come, like, cause you're going, good. That area, it's kind of where the brick wall is. I don't know what the corners are called verbatim, but there's like a stone wall and it's kind of a straightaway and it comes into a really tight hairpin. And so like if you can't see and you don't know the kind of visual cues of when to start braking, it'll come up on you quick and you'll lock up and you'll go into a guardrail. So like that was the first time the mountain really spooked me and I was like, all right, this isn't something to play with.
And what are the mechanics of this, right? So we're in May 2023. You go up for your first day of practicing. You've done your first run. You wait up top for everybody else to do their run so that they can open the mountain going down so that you can go back and stage and do another practice run?
Yeah, so the logistics are actually really cool. And I really didn't realize what the logistics were going to be. So when you test the mountain, it tests in sections. So we were on the bottom section, and the bottom section will stop. You'll get a checkered flag before you get to where the brake check booth is, and that's the start of the second section. And then there's a third section, which is the top section. So when you run just a section for practice, you'll get a checkered flag coming out of, a designated corner. And then there'll be a couple corners before you get to the start of the next section because cars might be running on that section. And so after you get the checkered flag, you kind of cruise and you have to make a U-turn and face back down the mountain. And then if you're not the first car that's run, there'll be a line of cars in the lane coming down the mountain. So you'll go by them, you'll make a U-turn, you'll line back up and basically just park there and wait for everyone to do their runs. And then you'll be released to go back down to the start. Now, here's the thing. Doing a U-turn on a 2-lane road might sound pretty easy if you're in like a street car. Like, oh yeah, you just got to take a couple cracks at it.
Yeah, a little 3-point turn or something.
Now, I'm in a road course sprint car. I mean, this thing is barely made to turn to begin with, let alone going back and forth. And so that was also another like scary moment of like, I was more nervous to make a U-turn and turn this thing around than I was to actually run the runs. And the way that we had a 4-speed sequential, that we put into the sprint car to make it, have multiple gears rather than like a single gear that a typical sprint car has, or Silver Crowns used to have 2 speeds, stuff like that. But our reverse was this tab that was located underneath my seat. So I would have to click the transmission down into neutral, hold the clutch, grab this like tab, pull it, it would put the vehicle into reverse. I could then reverse, and then I would have to go back in neutral, push the tab, and then it would go back, and then I could click first again. So not the most elegant, like reverse drive situation that you had.
Yeah, just the ergo of that. It sounds like, okay, if you had to reverse one time, fine, you can figure out how to hold your clutch and grab that tab under your seat and make it work. But now you're having to sort of inch your way forward, back repeatedly.
Yeah, and I'm in a solid rear axle vehicle, and with a quick change locking differential. Like, this thing does not want to turn at low speeds. And I started like going further up because like if you went closer to the brake check booth, you could like make it a full U-turn. And then I got yelled at of like, hey, you can't go up that far. And then I was like, oh, maybe I could like, give it a little throttle, rotate this thing around. I almost launched myself off the side of the mountain, just turning the vehicle around because I got on throttle.
You tried to do a little burnout in place.
Yeah, and it understeered and almost like lurched itself off the dirt.
Oh, Jesus.
But as I did more runs, I got more comfortable with getting in reverse and just taking my time and that sort of stuff. But yeah, funny enough, the most challenging part with this road course sprint car was making U-turns.
And I have to imagine you have a really sensitive throttle, like any race car. These things aren't designed to go slowly. That sounds kind of funny to the uninitiated, but the car is made to have get up and go, and you get on the throttle and it wants to go, right? It wants to launch you ahead. So I can imagine just gently feathering on that throttle so that you don't actually lurch forward so that you can make this U-turn is got to be incredibly hard.
Yeah, it was difficult to get used to, but I got the hang of it. Now, the other thing of like, once you make this U-turn and you're lined up waiting, you have enough time usually that you can get out of the car. And so it was really cool. And that was like another like awesome experience during these practice days is once again, you have all these really, really cool cars that are there to run Pikes Peak and famous drivers, people that I've looked up to since I was young, and like, you're there a part of it. And so like, waiting to go back down the mountain, like you jump out and walk down and fortunate enough that same year, I had a friend, Lonnie Unser, really, really good friends. She was in the same practice sessions as I was, or on the same parts of the mountain. So it was like fun. You can get out and like chat and talk about a couple of the corners, or like how'd your run go and things of that nature. And it's kind of fun to like hang out and you're watching like the finish line of this little section, standing on the road of Pikes Peak, listening to the cars come up. It was just kind of like one of those, once again, like surreal moments of like, wow, I'm here and I'm a part of this.
That's just crazy. And you mentioned Lonnie. Was it her grandfather who was Louis Unser, who ran this back in the 30s and was like well known as a winner of this race in those even pre-sprint car type of vehicles that they would bring up on the dirt mountain?
They nicknamed Pikes Peak Unser Mountain because of how successful the Unser family was. I mean, there was Al Jr., Bobby, Robbie, Bobby Jr. Like, I probably mixed up a couple of those Unser names, but there's a lot of them that raced. There was an immense amount of Unsers that raced on the mountain. They might be the most winning family, if that makes sense. Like,
Yeah.
out of any family, they have the most wins on the mountain. And so, yeah, it's like a great uncle or something of that nature. The Unser family tree is quite complex in the way that it's laid out and how you get down to Lonnie Unser. But
There are a lot of different kind of families.
yeah, and so she's carrying on the family legacy and putting that name back on the mountain, which has been really cool. And I think at this point, it might have been her second time or third time running the mountain in 2023. And she's still racing at Pikes Peak.
That's awesome. And I mean, just looking through the competitors list, like I'm just looking at last year's race, the list of names here, you mentioned, oh, there's a lot of famous people who run this race. There's a lot of names. This is like an all-star lineup of people from racing from all these different walks, right? Of course, Robin Shute, Romain Dumas, who has the all-time overall mountain record in an electric VW that they took up the mountain. You have David Donahue, the Vashholzes, Tanner Faust, Jeff Swart, Randy Popst. Oh, who's this guy? Sylas Montgomery.
See, it's crazy. Like, you list those names and then it's like my name and you're like, okay, something's off.
And then further down the list, there's still names I recognize. So that puts you in pretty darn good company.
No, it was really cool. So one of the individuals, the drivers of the year in 2023, who was also a rookie, but not a rookie to motorsports by any means. If you've ever heard of him, Mad Mike Widet.
I don't know the name.
So he's from New Zealand. He's this crazy Kiwi, and he drifts, and he usually has like rotary powered RX-7, stuff like that, really close connections with Mazda. And I grew up like watching like the hype clips because he was sponsored by Red Bull, and you'd see like these really cool things that he would do on the internet. And so like he was there, and I was like, oh my God, like once again, a childhood hero that you're seeing, and not trying to like fanboy and be like, oh my God, it's you. But even on one of those first weekends, especially during the testing days, like everyone's checking out everyone's rig because it's like, okay, you're unveiling these cars for the first time in the paddock. Like even the internet hasn't seen any of these vehicles yet. And so you're kind of like walking around looking at other people's stuff. And like he actually came up and like was talking to me about the road course sprint car. And I'm like, this is such a cool experience of like to be a part, to be amongst these legends, these icons, these heroes that are racing this, but then also being legit of like, we built this road course sprint car kind of in our backyard, in our garage here at Sonoma Raceway, team of 3 people in 6 months. And like, we're here and we're being recognized by these high-end teams. Another funny story is like, I think that was the same year that Alpine showed up with one of their crazy Alpine cars.
Yeah, the Alpine A110 GT4 Evo.
Thing was so sick, so beautiful. And it was funny because like all of the French engineers that were working on that, there were so many of them that came over to the sprint car and they were looking at it and they're like whispering things in French and they're like so confused because it's like their car was so sophisticated and they have like F1 technology and stuff like that. And then they come over and look at a sprint car with just like solid axles, rudimentary suspension geometry, like crazy looking, steering arms and stuff like that looks like it's from a tractor. And it's just crazy. The type of experiences you have on the mountain are just like compared to nothing.
Just the dissonance that you must have caused for those guys, right? They're well funded by these huge factory teams and they have all the resources they can possibly need. And you're like, hey, look what we built.
Right. And there's 3 of us. And it's like, so those teams have 10, 15 people, engineers, people looking at all these like data and stuff like that. And when we showed up, MFG Motorsports, it was me, the driver, Tim Barber, the builder, engineer, crew chief. And then we had, in the beginning during the test days, we had a buddy, Ray Zanato, that came out and helped as a crew. And then when it came closer to the race day, we had another friend, Casey Bates, who she's like a BMW tech here in the Bay Area, or used to be, and moved away from that stuff. But like, that was it. That was our team. And then my dad was there, of course, like watching. And funny enough, to fit like the visual of this road course sprint car amongst like these highly engineered and sophisticated racing machines, my dad would also wear, he had like this raccoon hat. And it was like it used to be at one point a legit raccoon.
Like a Daniel Boone style?
Like Davy Crockett.
That's
like
what I was, okay.
Yeah, like we're talking like the head of the raccoon is on the front and the tail is on the back.
Oh, no.
And so he's cruising around in like basically a Canadian tuxedo, denim on denim, wearing his raccoon hat. And we have a road course sprint car at Pikes Peak. Like, we look like the most ragtag bunch you can imagine.
Dude, that's insane. And so give me a little bit of the picture, right? So you have this team of 3 people looking after your car. And
I'm one of them.
And you're one of them. And so parked out at, I guess, what we would call the staging area before you go up the mountain. I imagine you're alongside tractor trailers and big, well-funded race teams. Like, how did that have to feel? I mean, like, you were just a couple of people with your little car, and were you working on it in between, or was it pretty much all dialed in and ready to go?
Well, yeah, rolling up, you're kind of like, okay, I feel like small fish in a big pond, for sure. Kind of, I didn't feel like we didn't belong. I definitely felt like we did belong. I was like, I feel like we have the coolest Pikes Peak car because it's like the most radical. It's the craziest looking. It's just like, it doesn't follow any sort of like norm whatsoever. And I'm like, I feel like we belong here. But also that piece of the comparison of like these $1 million teams, and we're just like, you know, ragtag grassroots bunch of like, you know, I think we got something to prove here. And to your point of, you know, were we working on the car a lot, massive credit to Tim Barber and the vehicles that he builds. We didn't have to do a thing to that car all month long. We didn't have to make any other than just taking it back to the shop after these days on the mountain, just nut and bolting it, making sure nothing looked bad. We didn't have any mechanical issues. We didn't have overheating issues. So while these like massive engineering teams are coming off the mountain after their practice runs back into the pits, and they're taking things apart and they're wrenching on stuff and they're doing all these crazy adjustments, we'd come down after our practice runs, wipe the thing down, make it look good, and then line back up for another run.
That's out of control. When you think about the amount of fiddling and like tuning and engineering based on data and everything that these cars from the more well-funded big factory teams must be doing, and you come out and you're like polishing it. What a huge testament to you guys, to Tim Barber for building this thing and being able to anticipate the challenges that you'd see, you know, in weather, in terrain, in just all these different things, working at, you know, reduced oxygen, all those kind of things, and to be able to make a car that just was sort of rock solid, you roll up and go drive.
Yeah, and comparing the road course sprint car to a lot of these other vehicles, the other vehicles could be described as like these like fine specialized tools, and like the road course sprint car mindset was just like bigger hammer. Like it was like everything is simple. It's just a naturally aspirated V8, you know, simple componentry in the rear ends, the transmission, even though it's a sequential, very simple in it, the way that it was dialed in and stuff like that. And it was just kind of like, make something simple. Don't overcomplicate it. Throw a massive wing on the top that's very not sophisticated by any means. It basically looks like a big picnic table. That's all it required. It was just like simple big hammer tool for the job, and it was able to do really well.
Just a blunt instrument.
Yeah. And the thing is, like, as we're going through the month of June, we're doing these different test weekends. We're getting closer to the race week. I think at every single test day, especially in the first 2 weeks, there was at least one car that got totaled. And like, as we're going through this month, and I'm like watching this, my rookie year, going through all this stuff, and I'm just like, hey, you know, cross your T's, dot your I's, like just make sure that everything's good. Don't put a wheel wrong. And you would just watch these cars just get obliterated. And I'm like, don't take this for granted. Like this place is no joke of like, your month can be over so quick. And there was like cars that I would watch, and it was like something would break and it would just launch itself into the trees like 50 feet from the starting line and stuff like that. And it's kind of like, yeah, I guess like if anything goes wrong, one little bit, whether it's driver error, mechanical error, whatever, the consequences are huge up there.
And it's got to be like, I don't know, putting somebody back together who gets blown up in the infantry out on the field. Like, you have the tools you brought with you. You have the know-how that you came with, and that's it. It's not like you're going to go run back to the shop. You're up on the mountain. You got to fix what you can fix in place. You have to deal with the issues that you run into, whatever the consequences may be. And so the the cost of a failure would be so high. It would basically put you out of the running to know you had something that was so capable and so reliable. That's got to be a huge boost of confidence to you as well.
Right. And we're far away from home. It's not like we're at close to Sonoma Raceway. Like if anything big goes wrong, it's not like we can go back to the shop and fix it. And that's the same for all these other teams of, yeah, if you wreck your car in the first couple weeks of the test month, like, yeah, you can try to go home and fix the car within a week or two and then try to come back out to Pikes Peak. But like the logistics, like you're saying, it's crazy. And so when we were out there, our home base while we were there was in Woodland Park, which is where the Vaschultz automotive shop is, and then their big compound. And so we were able to use one of their storage shops as our kind of home base. So we had an area we were able to work on the car. But once again, to your point, we only had what we brought in a trailer from California. So it's kind of like you got to work with what you have. And if you start wrecking stuff or blowing stuff up and need replacement parts, that's where you kind of put yourself in a sticky situation to even make it race day at the end of the month.
That's just nuts. So it's just like literally like doing an operation out in the field. Like somebody gets their leg blown up and you're going to need to kind of like decide what you can do with what you can do given the time and circumstances. And that's the consequences of things going badly. And it was really fortunate that you were able to, through the combination of excellent engineering and build work and preparation and just keeping it clean, to be able to avoid all of that.
Yeah. And so through the testing month, nothing went wrong with the car. Nothing went wrong on course. I was learning the mountain as much as possible and the different sections and stuff like that. Then you come to race week, which race week in and of itself has test days and it has the qualifying day. And then the race will happen on Sunday. So you're still putting a lot of seat time in the car during race week. And so we go into this and we're like, all right, we came here with one goal, just make it to the top. As we're starting to do our practice days, you still get your times for the different sections. And like, I'm not trying to pay attention to it because once again, like, I don't want to get in that racer mindset of like, okay, we're close to like succeeding or like getting a trophy. Like, okay, let's like go for it. So I kind of like don't really pay attention to that. Cody Vaschultz was actually keeping track of like my times and stuff. He's like, you're doing pretty good. Like this is looking good for like a really good run for your first time, your rookie year. And I'm like, don't really tell me like the focus is just make it to the top. We don't need to push too much and drive too hard. And so for qualifying and for the qualifying day, it's when you run the bottom section and then your best run of that day is your qualifying time. And that was like our first point of documented success because Pikes Peak, they do a thing called the Fast 15. So if you're within the Fast 15 qualifiers out of all the categories, out of all the groups, you get it put into this special group. And during Fan Fest, which is a thing that they host in Colorado Springs for all the locals to come out and see all the cars, you get to be parked in the Fast 15 corral. Once again, first year, I don't even know, like, I can't even spell Fast 15, right? I'm a rookie. Like, I don't even know anything about it. And so qualifying goes awesome. And it's the first time we put on full slicks. So we were running like an intermediate tire just to be safe of like changing conditions, not to have like any sort of scary moments on the mountain. And yeah, we make it into the Fast 15. I think I qualified 12th or 13th of the 15. And we're like, oh my God, like we're looking pretty legit.
It's out of control. When you, again, go back and look at the list of who was in this race, what they were competing with, and, you know, just scrape that top 15 list. That's pretty rarefied air that you find yourself among. No pun intended, given how high you up are on the mountain.
Yeah, exactly. And so we qualify on the bottom section. And during the race week, you'll practice each sections at least once. And then they have an extra day, like if you have hardship or whatever, you can practice fourth day. And so after our qualifying day, we finally get put on the top section of the mountain. And for our entire month of testing, the weather was such that we couldn't test the top section. And the top section is usually the sketchiest sections where all the bumps are. It's actually pretty high speed. It's the biggest wear and tear on the car because now you're at the highest altitude. And it starts at Devil's Playground and goes to the summit. And so we practice the top section after we qualify. So we qualify, we're like, cool, we're in the top 15, we're feeling pretty good.
At this point, you still hadn't even driven the top section.
Never driven the top section. And the top section is like the sketchiest section. That was the section I was most worried about. Like on the sim, that was the hardest one for me to memorize. And you can see on the track map, there's not a lot of corners. It's pretty high speed, but it's a lot of blind stuff. And it's blind left-handers around the mountain that almost all look identical.
Let me flesh out the picture a little bit. Okay, so this starts at the point of the course they call Devil's Playground.
Yep.
So that's at 12,780 feet of elevation. Your next major features that you're going to go through are an area called Bottomless Pit, Upper Gravel Pit, Boulder Park, Cog Cut, Olympic, and then the summit. The summit's at 14,110 feet. And this is the upper section of the track, which you had never driven even after qualifying.
Right, because qualifying's only on the bottom section. And we put down a good qualifying time where we're looking good for the race day, but we still need to practice the upper section. And as a rookie, you are required to make at least one run on every section before race day. So even if we're like, okay, we don't need to practice the top section, obviously we needed to practice the top section, we would be required to make at least one run. Now that run could be idling up the mountain and you'd still qualify and make the check marks for your rookie year, but qualifying on the upper section. Coolest experience, scariest experience. Now, my favorite section to practice was the middle section. That was my favorite, just because for the middle section, where you're at, you can see a lot of the course up in front of you, and you have this big face of the mountain that you're looking at, and it's beautiful in the sunrise and all that sort of stuff. But practicing the upper section where you have to park, which is at Devil's Playground, you got to park your towing rig in this like uneven dirt parking lot. But you're at the top of the middle section and you have this gorgeous view. And the sunrise there is just unbelievable what you can see on that upper section. And obviously for the upper section, practicing is really fun because you get to make it to the top. Even though it's not race day, like you still get to the summit, feel what that feels like and all that sort of stuff. And the upper section, like I said, is one of the most difficult. And it's because of the bumps. And it's because of how the road, the surface underneath the road freezes and thaws over the year. It'll change the pitch of the road, and it's ever changing. And so the biggest thing when you practice the top section is learning and memorizing where the bumps are, of what sort of bump your car can take and what sort of bump is going to launch your car over a lane or if into the dirt off the mountain. And so it's like this kind of like double-edged sword of you want to get comfortable, you want to get fast, but you also don't want to damage the vehicle. And like I said, we already qualified. So when we're practicing this upper section, I'm trying to learn as much as possible. How much can I push the vehicle? How fast can it go? But also paying attention to don't damage anything.
Yeah, right. And this is in this area where, you know, there's constantly evolution happening. I mean, mountains look like they're just fixed in space and they're not changing in any way, but
Right.
constantly every year the weather and the conditions are changing. There's landslides and boulders and rocks rolling around and things moving around. You had talked about previously, you know, the first couple of runs that go up there, you have these loud vehicles that are shaking things loose on the mountain. So all of that sort of underpins what the road has been paved on. And so that has to be really hard to kind of navigate and figure out what you're in for. You don't have the experience driving on it, and you're not there until the very end.
Yeah. And so learning the bumps is super, super important. And that's where like the biggest changes you're going to make to your suspension is going to happen when you're on the upper section. And so when we originally signed up for practice and testing at the beginning of the month, we wanted to run the top first in case we needed to make any changes to our suspension. That didn't happen. So you need to learn the bumps on the top section. And also there's high speed corners on that top section. And there's a handful of left-handers that wrap around the mountain that are consecutive, or you wrap to the left and then you make a right, then you wrap to the left and then you make a right, then you wrap to the left. And those three left-handers, they all visually look the same, but are drastically different of how much speed you can carry through them. And there's a couple of them. There's definitely one that you have to brake, you have to slow the vehicle down. But then the other ones are like kind of flat, almost flat. Like, can you hold it flat? Can you remember which corner you're going into and have the confidence that you have zero visual because you can't see around the mountain? And on the right side, it's just ledge into Boulder Park. And we only had so many runs that we could make. And I'm like, okay, there's a lot of time to make up on the top section. But don't be a rookie. Don't get caught off, right? A lot of rookies make mistakes on the upper section. And with these few runs, I'm like, all right, this corner like seems like it should be flat. And I'm like, all right, next run, I'm just going to go flat. And I'm going to see if it sticks or if it doesn't stick.
Oh, geez.
Which, I mean, not a great mindset, but like as a racer, you know, like you're like, I think there's a little bit more. And like, how do you know a corner's flat? You try to go flat and
Yeah.
you see if it works or if it doesn't work.
That's right. How do you find the limit? Sometimes on the other side of it, but hopefully not in this case.
And so on this run, I'm like, all right, it's close. It's like barely a lift. Like I feel like it should go flat. And this was my like biggest scary moment that I've had on the mountain of like in the beginning, obviously I got fogged in. There was like some weather conditions. And in this moment, like I go around this corner, I'm just like, I'm going to hold it flat. And I don't know if I caught like a dirty section of the pavement. I don't know if the right rear got on the double yellow line. I don't know what happened, but in that moment, it was not flat and the car started getting sideways. And I do a good job of catching the first slide and I get the car back under control. But then now I'm a lane away from where I want to be. And now I'm in the dirty section, the dusty section of the track. So now it gets loose again, a second time. And I'm starting to run out of real estate of how much black stuff I have before it starts turning into dirt and ledge. And I'm thinking to myself, in this moment, I'm like, all right, this is my last shot. Like, I got to catch this thing and I hope it sticks, because if it gets sideways again, I'm out of real estate. I'm off. And thankfully on that second catch, the thing hooks back up and had enough grip. And at this point, I'm going slow, right? Like one loss, big wing on top, side force, slows it down. Second loss, even slower, catch it on the edge of the pavement. Thankfully, it didn't get loose a third time. And I'm like looking off over to the right, and it's a ledge. It doesn't fall off. It's not like a cliff, but there's a ledge that'll end up down where all the big boulders are. And I'm like, that wouldn't have felt good.
Yeah,
and that
you're not
wouldn't
going to be doing real well down there.
Right. And so that was the point. I was like, I finished the rest of the run. I get back down once we come back down the mountain and get back to, where we're at and we're paddocked. And I was like, I think we're good. I think we've learned everything we can learn for the upper section, and we should keep the car in one piece. And I was like, the bumps are getting pretty gnarly. I just don't want to like break anything in the rear end or something like that. I didn't fully express my moment that I had of scaring myself, of trying to find the limits on Pikes Peak.
Out of control. And I'm just looking at the track map here on Google Maps with Google Earth. And if you look at that last section called Olympic before the summit, so this is following in the upper section where you were talking about there being some like, faster corners and some sweepers. And then you come up on this hairpin, which the consequences of going off, I mean, just look at this picture. Here's the edge of the mountain, and there's effectively like a 180-degree hairpin that you're going to go through. And if you didn't remember that was the ultimate or the penultimate corner, I can imagine, wow, that's a really freaking long way down.
Right. So now let's fast forward to race day.
Yeah, let's talk about it.
So race day comes Sunday is race day. And I'm pretty sure from FanFest of like meeting so many people and being around so many other people, I got sick. Like race day, I was like not feeling good. And even the night before, I was like super concerned of, I don't feel good. Like I got a gnarly cold, slight flu, some situation. I'm like, this isn't going to be good. And so we get there, race day. You get there really, really early to be able to get on the mountain, get everything set, all that stuff. And so I'm sleeping in the back of one of our support vehicles, trying to get as much rest as possible before like driver's meeting, getting in the car, all of the race day festivities, and there's fans there and all this sorts of stuff. So I'm trying to get as much rest as possible. And I'm taking like Tylenol, cold flu, like I'm trying to like feel good and like all this stuff, trying to hydrate as much as possible. Not ideal conditions for your race run. Maybe a blessing in disguise of like, okay, just take it easy. Like you don't need to overdrive the vehicle. You don't need to go for it. The year that we did it in 2023, the weather was beautiful. And since we qualified in the Fast 15, we had a pretty good starting spot because there's going to be 70 competitors and you go one at a time. And so if you're far down the list in qualifying, that means you're going closer to like midday, and heat can start becoming a factor if it is a nice day on Pikes Peak. And so we were like, perfect. We're like, we're not going to be one of the first cars up. That means like the other cars can like brush the mountain away of like dirt.
Clean the surface.
Yeah. And so like some of the gnarly cars that were like the fastest cars, they have really crazy aero and diffusers and stuff. And they'll like actually like vacuum the dirt off of the pavement. And so we're like, okay, we're looking at a good spot. Everything's looking good. There's so many more people on the mountain now. Obviously during testing, like you don't see any people, like it's just a vacant mountain. Obviously, like you're the only one out there. And so getting ready for my race run and putting my oxygen tubing in and all this stuff, getting belted in the car, like pretty much super early. Cause I'm like antsy of like, okay, I just want to be ready. I don't want to not be ready. Getting lined up and like, there's this crowd in the starting line. There's all these people around you. And it was such a surreal moment of like lining up and like putting your visor down, making sure all the GoPros are running because you want to make sure you document your run. And there's all these people around you, and things just kind of go quiet for a little bit. Like you're just waiting for that green flag, and they'll send cars a decent amount of time apart. So even though you roll up to that starting line, doesn't mean you're going to go right away. And so you have this little bit of time to kind of like focus. And the biggest thing that I did in that moment was I didn't want to overthink things. I didn't want to like, wig myself out mentally. I just thought about the first 2 corners. The first corner getting to the start line and pretty much the 2 corners after that. And just thinking to myself, like visualizing, how do I nail that? Get the car off, launch it, get it in gear, and get it going. And so time comes, waiting for the green flag. Of course, Tim was like, just do a gnarly burnout. And I was like, yeah, pretty much like put on a good show, roast the tires off the line. Also, it gets the rears warm really quick, and then you only have to worry about the fronts and just understeer the first couple corners. And then after that, things will come up to temperature. And so see the green, bunch of revs, dump the hand clutch, and just hitting a chip coming off the line. And then things starts hooking up, click the next gear, focused on those first 2 corners nice and smooth. And then after that, it was just like complete flow state of everything else just started coming together. And that bottom section, running the bottom section, which I had run so many times on race day, I start seeing like the rev lights coming in areas that they weren't before. Like I can start
Carrying more
feeling
speed, yeah.
I'm carrying more speed. Like there is no like split time that you have on your dashboard that you can see like, all right, I got a green delta. Like that doesn't exist. And so like I'm hitting my marks, things are flowing good. I can see that I have like speeds coming in this bottom section. I'm like, this is going good. Like this is going really good. And bottom section goes really nice, really flowed, didn't miss any marks. Then boom, I'm past brake check. I'm like, this is going fast.
Now you're in middle section.
Now I'm in the middle section. I'm like, okay, switch that mindset. As soon as I went past the brake check booth, I'm like, this section has a different cadence. It's not as fast and flowy as the bottom section is. Just nail your marks. And
this is all those switchbacks they call the W's.
The W's. And it's a bunch of really big hairpins, braking zones. You need to downshift the car. And in my head, I'm like, just don't blow a braking zone. Don't come in too hot. Because if you come in too hot, to be able to get that car to rotate and get back out of the corner, you're going to be losing way more time than if you just slowed it down and get it turned. And so that's my mindset. I'm coming through the W's. The first section into the W's where you get above the tree line, that fast right-hander, where you get above the trees and it's just sky in front of you. I'm just like, okay, nail your braking point here. Had a little bit of a moment of the rear sliding, but it's so intense focus. It was just kind of like you dealt with it and you carried on. And then now I get to the W's and the back and forth, and I'm like, all right, just take it easy on the entry. Make sure you don't miss a shift or anything like that. Just stay really focused. Nail my marks through the W's. Now I'm at the top through Devil's Playground. And this is where I wasn't as experienced on the upper section. And as I get to the top of the middle section and through Devil's Playground, the racer mind kind of starts slipping away from me of like, okay, you've nailed the first 2 sections. And what started coming to my head of like, just don't go off. Just don't make a mistake. And like as a racer, as soon as your mind kind of like pulls yourself out of like, okay, just make it to the top. I was like, okay, don't overcook it. Don't be a hero. Don't try to send it. And the upper section, like still was carrying good speed, good and flowy, wasn't pushing as hard as I was in those first 2 sections of reminding myself why we're here, why we came to Pikes Peak. Just make it to the top. Don't be a hero. Don't think you're going to get your name in the history books or anything like that. Just make it to the summit. And so that upper section, especially once you got to the last couple corners where all the big bumps are, like cog cut, stuff like that. Once you get to cog cut, you're like, there's only one more hairpin. There's only one more. And so taking it easy, not getting on the accelerator too hard on the bumps, stuff like that, final corner, and then coming across the finish line, it's blind until you can see the flagger, and then it's the checkers. As soon as I crossed, I was just like, wow, it's over. Like it was just like this huge, like not necessarily like relief, but this realization of like this entire month, what we came here to do, this amazing experience, all this stuff. I was like almost kind of sad in the sense of like, it's done. That's it.
It all culminates with that run, right? You're over the finish line and that's it. It's over.
It's over. I don't get to drive Pikes Peak. And if I come back, it's going to be in a year's time that I get to do this again. And that was it.
You ran your race. Yeah, it's another thing that's so unique about this sort of format of the hill climb, right? It's a one-way race from the bottom to the top. We're so used to road racing or oval racing or whatever it is, dirt tracks. You keep going around and around. You get to the start finish. It's called start finish. It's not called the start and the finish. And in this case, the finish really means finish.
Right. And for racing wheel to wheel and stuff, like you get 30, 40, 50 an hour in the car. This, average is 10 minutes and it's over. And it was kind of like, wow, that was over so quick. Like, I wish I could have like been more in the moment or whatever. But like, obviously your mindset and being focused on the task at hand, like you can't be sitting there just like, taking it all in. And another thing of this race run, the fans and some of the corners look different because it was like, oh my God, there's so many people. And like, how cool of like all of these fans, all of these spectators that came out here to be on the mountain to watch this race. And like, once again, the flashbacks of like watching it as a kid and the highlight clips and all this history. And like, here I am, 2023, I'm in it. I'm a part of it. Like, I'm a part of the show. And then, yeah, that checkered flag, the relief. And then you come around and you park because you have to wait at the summit. You have to wait for everyone else to run their runs. You're stuck on the top of the mountain for 3 to 4 hours. And I come to a stop and it's just kind of like, all the other drivers will come around your car and, Donahue was the first one to my window and said like, welcome to the top. And you're kind of like, oh my God, this like crazy thing. We've
That's
made it
so
to the top of
huge.
Pikes Peak, massive. And, I'm getting out of the car and stuff. And one of the officials comes over and was like, do you want to know your time? And I'm like, yeah, absolutely. Like, I'm here. And all I heard come out of her mouth was a 9, and I didn't hear or listen to the rest of it. I was just, and
Mind blown.
climbed up the back of the sprint car, climbed up on the tire, got on the cage, and just arms in the air. And like, there was a great photo of that moment of just like, not only did I make it to the summit of Pikes Peak, but like, I did it in good fashion. Like, it wasn't a slow run by any means.
That's incredible. And you had all these fans there watching you do it, hearing your car coming before it got there, coming up the mountain.
Yeah.
And I imagine this scene where like these people are just kind of like hanging off the mountain, like leaning over where the cars are going by, just kind of taking it all in. They had to have that feeling of just like victory, right? Like you got to
Yeah.
the top, you made it, you successfully got to the top, you survived. But now you're being greeted by the other drivers who've done this, who've maybe done this 5 or 10 or more times before you, your first time up, and they sort of welcome you to the club. What a feeling that's got to be.
It was insane. I mean, it was such a high of being up there and you're just like, this is incredible. This is amazing. And then funny enough, it all kind of like comes crashing down a little bit because you're like, oh God, I'm stuck on the top of this mountain for 3 hours before I can like go back down. And like, you can't talk to your team. Like, you can't celebrate with anyone. Like, you're up there celebrating alone with your fellow drivers, but it's like, you have no communication down to the bottom or anything. So it's like, I have no idea what's going on down in the pits with my friends and family and the team and all this stuff. Like, I can't see them for another 3 hours. And thankfully, you are allowed to like put a backpack in a van that'll like go to the summit. So you can go to this van, grab your backpack. There's a welcome center that you get to hang out in. They have like lunch for you and stuff like that up there. And so you're basically hanging out with all the other drivers in this like cafeteria area of the welcome center, watching the live stream on the television. And after the adrenaline wears off and the excitement and all this stuff, I was like, oh yeah, that's right, I'm sick. And I'm at 14,000 feet, and thankfully I packed a bunch of medicine in my backpack, so I'm just like popping Tylenol and like trying to feel good, and I'm just sitting there and just like, I don't feel good. Like, this terrible cold comes back on me, and I'm like so excited of all this stuff that happened, but also like feeling bad and all that stuff.
You must have felt like you wanted to crawl back in the car and take another hit of that oxygen.
Right. I was like, can I bring the bottle inside with me?
That's incredible.
But
man.
then watching that live stream, you're watching all the rest of the competitors go up. And, I was in a class, I think, of 17 rookies that year. And rookie of the year always goes to the person that's the fastest rookie on the mountain that year. And so I'm kind of watching, and I'm like, oh, wow, like my time's, it's the fastest rookie. And there's a couple competitors at the end that like could potentially dethrone my time and stuff like that. And I'm second in class, behind Cody Vaschholz. And there is a car that's like one of the last cars to go that could, bump me down and off the podium, maybe into third or even fourth place. And so I'm still like glued to the TV at the very end of like, oh man, like, we could be leaving here with some serious hardware. Like, coming away from Pikes Peak your rookie year with potentially 2 trophies.
That's unreal. And was there a podium celebration down there once you got to the bottom?
They did the awards the next day.
Okay.
Yep. So once you get down off the mountain, the main focus is like packing everything up, getting back, and then the awards is the day after. It's in like a nice hotel lobby hall thing. That's where I was awarded Rookie of the Year for 2023, and then also was able to clinch second place in the open wheel category behind Cody.
That's unreal. And to be able to do that in the open wheel category, as we talked about earlier, sort of like the OG category of going up the mountain, and you did it in that with historically relevant people, like people who are champions multiple times over in this, and you came in second.
Right. And what an immense takeaway and success for the MFG team of we went to Pikes Peak of just saying, hey, we just want to make it to the summit and show off our cool build that we did. And now here we are doing a sub 10-minute time, which is a big barrier for Pikes Peak, finishing second in class and getting awarded Rookie of the Year. It was kind of like, damn, did we set the bar too high for us to ever come back of like, how do we even improve on this?
It's such a huge accomplishment. And just to put it in perspective, looking at the results here, there were only 12 cars out of the entire field of 70 that made it up the hill, up the mountain in under 10 minutes. Given all of the budgets, given all the factory backing, all the professional racers, all the history and families have been doing this for generations. That's it. That's rarefied air if I ever heard of it.
Yeah, and I think we finished 11th overall, and we were really close to finishing 10th. We were really close to actually beating Randy Popst. He was in a Tesla that year, and I think our times weren't too far apart.
You were within 1 second.
I could have pushed a little harder in a couple places.
Hey, Pikes Peak 2026 maybe?
Oh,
set new targets?
I would love to go back. It's one of those events that once you do it, the mountain just has a hold of you, and it's such a magical place. I mean, there's got to be some sort of magnet inside of that mountain that just draws you back to that event. And going there and being so successful, you kind of look at things of like, what do we need to do to be better? And that obviously increases the budget for the team, and making that happen logistically and finding the right partners to make that happen is a challenge in and of itself. And so hopefully we're able to put some pieces together and go back. I think the sprint car yearns for the mountain.
And I think you've achieved what they call the Rocky Mountain High.
Yeah, there's a high for sure that happens at the top of Pikes Peak when you take that checkered flag. And the donuts that I talked about of wanting the donuts at the summit, they make donuts at the top of Pikes Peak, and it's actually a pretty famous thing of when you get there with your lunch order, you get donuts as well. So like there's the celebration of succeeding at Pikes Peak. You eat these donuts, and they're the best donuts you've ever had.
It's probably the best anything you've ever had at that point.
Oh, yeah, for sure. But also thinking about like how do you make donuts at altitude? It's a story for a different time, but like making donuts at 14,000 feet, there's some science that goes into that.
Follow-up episode, making donuts at 14,000 feet for fun and profit.
But yeah, Pikes Peak was an unreal experience. And still to this day, I mean, a couple years later of just thinking about, the child version of myself looking at this event. And now I have an unbelievable trophy that says Rookie of the Year. It's still a pinch me moment of having that piece of history and being a part of the Pikes Peak history books, even though it's a small sentence in, pages of the history of the mountain. It's still really cool to be a part of.
It's such an accomplishment just to even be able to be accepted into this and go there and get on the mountain and do all this stuff and make it to the top. And wow, what an unreal feeling it must be to come away from that victorious, winning, coming back with trophies, coming back with the fanfare, the media hype, all that stuff that comes with that. I just got to say congratulations to you again, to you, the whole team who put this thing together, who made it possible. These kind of moments are made out of people taking chances, taking opportunities that are presented and then making the most out of them. And it sounds like you did that in then some.
Yeah, no, thank you. And massive praise to Tim Barber and Scherf and Casey and all the people that helped with the MFG effort. I mean, so many pieces have to come together to make an effort like that successful as it was. And yeah, it's crazy to be able to share this story of, if you have a crazy idea, go for it. You don't know what's going to happen. We had the crazy idea of making a road course sprint car, which seems like a terrible and stupid idea on so many levels. And it's like a bar napkin idea. And we were able to make an amazing car that is super good and fast and cool and all this awesome stuff. And then having the crazy idea after that of let's go do Pikes Peak, and what an unbelievable story and experience that has turned out to be. It's something I wouldn't trade for the world.
That's awesome. Well, thanks for sharing that story with us. It's so inspirational. It makes me want to go over to Pikes Peak. I know the race just ended, but we'll start getting ready for next year, okay?
Yeah, no, absolutely. I'm here for it. So thanks for listening, Todd. Really appreciate it.
Hey, thanks, Silas. That's awesome. Thanks for listening to Cold Start.